This morning is the second in the series of 6 Eyes on the Future, skills to help further your career. In particular, this seminar is boomers to Gen Z, communicating across different generations, different demographics. And we have a wonderful panel of experts who are going to speak to you today. Women that I have the privilege of working with, women that I have learned so much from, have become friends with. And I know you're going to enjoy their insight because I know that I do personally. I'm going to hand it over right now to Ms. Susan Crossett, who is the president and CEO of CPS Recruitment. And I do want to mention also CPS Recruitment is our presenting sponsor of this series. So thank you for your sponsorship of this event. It's only through the support of our members that we are able to bring you programming. So special thanks to CPS Recruitment. So with that being said, Susan, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited to be here this morning. It's a great opportunity to see everybody, even though it's not in person. I am one of those people that really does thrive on in-person meetings and connecting with people. So I think that Pennie and Erica and Ruthnie will tell me that I'm of the older generation. And I know it to be true. We're happy to be a sponsor for this event. We have been long-time sponsors of both predecessor organizations of Center State CEO and continue to be sponsors of Center State CEO since its creation 11 years ago. So this topic is pretty timely, especially as we think about bringing everybody back together, getting back in the office. We all know that developing talent is important, and learning how to work with one another is extremely important. I think that this gives us an opportunity to really appreciate everybody's attributes and where they come from, learning from one another, and how do we work together so that we can make our businesses the most successful going forward. It's all about collaboration and mission, understanding what that mission is. And so this is just one of the series that we're going to talk about these kinds of issues as we tackle them in the next few weeks. So I'm excited to be able to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with letting them introduce each other, introduce themselves, and then we'll get back to a little bit of what we're here to talk about. So let me start with Pennie. Do you want to kick us off?
I will. Good morning, and thank you so much. And thank you to Center State CEO for inviting us to present today. I'm Pennie Gorney. I'm the Director of Marketing with Dermody, Burke & Brown CPAs. We have 90 employees and 4 offices. I've been the Director of Marketing for over 17 years. And prior to that, I've been working in this community in advertising and marketing for 20 plus years. I'm a graduate of Syracuse University. I was a collegiate swimmer back at Syracuse. And my husband and I have 2 adult children, 1 millennial and 1 Generation Z.
Great, thank you, Pennie. Ruthnie, would you introduce yourself?
Ruthnie got kicked off. She's joining us again, so she may not be on right now, Susan.
Okay, let's skip to Erica then.
Okay, and thank you so much for having us today. I know Pennie and I had a lot of fun kind of analyzing this topic and putting some points together for you. I'm Erica Muscatello. I'm the marketing manager at Dermody, Burke & Brown. I've been with the firm for over 8 years now, and I have about 10 years of experience in the marketing industry. This presentation kind of brings me back full circle because prior to joining Dermody, Burke & Brown, I actually worked with Ruthnie, who's another panelist back at SU. It's a small world. And I have my master's in new media, and at the firm, I specialize in digital marketing.
Ruthnie, you're back on?
I am. I'm not sure if you can see me.
We can. Excellent. Will you introduce yourself? Thank you.
Going blind, so bear with me. My name is Ruthnie Angrand. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for the City of Syracuse. Like Erica said, we worked together at the press at SU in a past life, so it's wonderful to be able to join her for this discussion today, and just to be able to bring the city of Syracuse, government and geographic location wise, into a new space where we're really good at connecting with each other and communicating, not just to each other, but to other locations across the country so that people can see some of the great things we're doing here.
Thank you very much. And I must say congratulations to the mayor and to you and the rest of the team on last night's win. I'm pretty excited for everybody's and all of us here in Central New York and Syracuse. So
thank you. Thank you.
That's great. So one of the things that I failed to mention is, in case people don't know, CPS Recruitment is a staffing and recruiting firm here in Syracuse. We've been in business about 32 years. I bought the business January of 2020, 10 weeks before the pandemic hit. My timing was impeccable. Anyway, we've got an incredible team with lots of tenure that have been in this business a long time. They work very, very hard to help our clients and our candidates match the best possible scenario for each other. So we're excited to be part of it, as I said previously. With that, I'd like to kick it off to Pennie and to Erica. They're going to give us their presentation to begin with. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start. I'm putting on my glasses so you can tell I'm the boomer in the group. Okay, so we're going to be talking about from boomers to Gen Z and kind of working across demographics. So if you'd advance to the first slide, don't mind. So Eric and I are the marketing team at Dermody, Burke, and Brown. As Erica mentioned, we've worked together for 8 years. At DB&B, we really have a full range of generations and a full complement of personalities, I might add. And honestly, there's really power in multi-generations working together. I mean, we have seen that over the years. I've seen it over my expansive career as well. And you really just need to know how to harness and really embrace the collective power. And that's what we're going to talk to you about. You need to celebrate, you need to respect others, and really the strength in those generations and other generations working together really pushes success.
So here, as you can see, we list some of the common characteristics of each generation, and we like to touch on their generalizations. They're not always true, but it was based on the time frame that you were born, some of the experience you experienced, and it really does sometimes shape some of your values and your work tactics. So to start with the baby boomers, which is Pennie's generation, this group is very goal-oriented, achievement-oriented. They sometimes define themselves by professional achievements. They're competitive. They kind of see a hierarchy model, so working your way up to the top through successes. They value relationships. This is a really nice quality. They value those human relationships, kind of as Susan said, reaching out, picking up the phone, giving people a call. And they're very loyal generation. So they're loyal to their company. A lot of the baby boomers you'll see have worked with the same company maybe throughout their whole professional career or a long portion of it. And then that brings us to my generation, the Millennials, and Ruthnie's as well. And our group really thrives on collaboration and teamwork. Salary is not the end all be all for us in a professional setting. We really value our beliefs. And sometimes this is why we may have the reputation of changing jobs frequently, because we are very loyal to those values. And if we're not getting it, we're going to go somewhere else where you can get those values. And also we're almost titled the work to live generation, and we really value flexibility. Next slide.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is modes of communication and how we view things differently, but we do find intersections along the way. So I was raised with a telephone. We had one telephone in our house. When I went away to college, every Sunday we ran down the hall and used a payphone to call home. So that was sort of a starting point with communication. Fast forward communication to today, which is extremely powerful, and it's been embraced, and it's instantaneous, and it's wonderful. But I will tell you, sometimes as a boomer, I find myself going back to that human voice, to wanting to pick up the phone, to have a conversation with someone. Okay, I will shoot out an email. Obviously, I'm in marketing and communication. We understand all the various ways to communicate. But I hear in my brain this voice saying, pick up the phone, have that conversation. I realize you can cast a wider net with different forms of communication, but I tend to sometimes go back to that human voice, picking up the phone, making a human connection.
And again, with the millennials, so we were raised with a computer in front of us and a phone in our hand. And throughout our education, we even embraced social media and communicating in that way. I even in college would tweet in my homework assignments. So it really is just a difference in generation. We communicate a lot through social platforms as well. So when I joined the firm, we have a lot of boomers, and we're mainly boomers when I joined. It's starting to transition, but I kind of struggled in the beginning because I think millennials and communication really see efficiency. So I can just shoot off an email real quick and it's very efficient. Or we'd have some boomers bringing up a written piece of paper with notes that they wrote on it and putting it in front of you and then coming up and explaining it, because that is their mode of communication. And I found it very frustrating and said, oh, you can just put that in an email and it can be so much quicker. But one thing I have learned, and Pennie's taught me this as well, is we don't want to lose that human value and that human connection that is so important. So although it's not always comfortable for me to pick up the phone and have that conversation, I can really see the value in it. And I think my group, we may have more LinkedIn connections, but it's really those personal connections out in the community that are so impersonal, and Pennie really has that. So I think maybe meeting somewhere in the middle is the way to go.
I agree.
And then as far as collaboration, again, we kind of explained the millennials, collaboration is very important. So we're very teamwork oriented. We grew up working on group projects. We really like and value all different perspectives, and we find we work best that way. And again, working with my firm, we have a lot of boomers who they kind of like to, this is how it is, and they have their individualized opinions sometimes, and they like to kind of present that to you. And then we have some Gen X's as well, who I have found that I can go into their office and we can do idea generation and kind of really brainstorm, and we come up with the most valuable solutions that way because of the way we like to learn. And I think both methods are wonderful. You really have to know who you're working with, almost in marketing, know your audience. And I think sometimes with the collaboration, there you can tend to get off topic. So I think you really have to go in with a plan.
And with my generation, we were the command and control generation. Our background included, we went through the Vietnam conflict, we went through Woodstock, the civil rights movement. Do your own thing was one of the quotes that was popular. So growing up with that in your background, even in college, there was very little collaboration. You did your assignments, you turned it in, and you wanted to achieve to get to the top. But what I've learned, and I think it's especially because of the business that I'm in as well, very early on, collaboration was the way to go. I mean, brainstorming, obviously in marketing and advertising, is very important. I was forced to collaborate, and I think it's important. As Erica said, sometimes you can get off topic, but it's so much stronger to listen to different voices from all generations when you're coming up with ideas and pushing things forward. Next, we're going to briefly talk about technology. I think boomers get a bad rap when it comes to, whoops, we're back to, yeah. I think boomers get a bad rap when it comes to technology. I mean, I was laughing this morning. I said, hey, my 88-year-old mother's on Instagram. She tweets, you know, she's on Facebook. So I think all generations have embraced technology. We realize that you can't be successful in business if you don't embrace technology. I mean, things are moving at a rapid pace, even in our business. I mean, it's amazing what's happening. I think that maybe with the boomers, we may be a little bit slower to embrace this because we did not grow up with technology, but I think we've come a long way. I kind of joke, I think our IT department runs when they see me coming because I usually have so many questions. But once I get it, I'm thrilled to be using technology. And I think too, the only thing I would warn with technology, and Erica's going to touch on this, is technology is a blessing, but it's also a curse. I mean, I'm checking emails at 10 o'clock at night. You know, when do you shut it down? And I think the pandemic has made this even more imperative. Like there's a blur between your home life and your work life. So I would just say, be careful with that.
Again, so for the millennials, like Pennie talked about a lot, it kind of comes a little more natural to my generation. We grew up with it. And I think with the pandemic and the shift towards digital, our generation kind of really took it on without much interruption, and we're able to kind of pick up and move forward, although there was interruption everywhere. And as Pennie mentioned, the downside really is turning off. And there's also a blur between personal and professional that comes along with it. So I find I'm in a meeting and my Apple Watch is going off with like LinkedIn notifications and then app alerts for my son's school and calls. And it's just very distracting. So I think sometimes for your sanity, you really have to just shut off and separate. And then last, we'll quickly touch on decision making. And millennials are kind of known as this research generation, right? We grew up with all these information readily available at our fingertips. Why kind of figure out the answer when you can just ask Google? You have so many resources available to you. So what I've really found is with boomers, and from kind of looking at Pennie and a lot of the partner group that I work with, they kind of go back, revert to their human connections and gather information that way before making a decision. So while they're asking these human connections, we're asking our trusty friend Google and teaching ourselves. So there's definitely positives in this day and age of both. But so I think, you know, asking questions and then also finding sources and teaching yourself. You have to be careful nowadays. There are some fake news sources and there's an overload of information. But again, with how I feel about all of these, I think somewhere in the middle is best.
And we often laugh. I'll say, why ask Google when I can call people on this call and probably get exceptional information and get some resources. But Eric is absolutely right. I don't want to get into all the details, but it's really somewhere in the middle, because you can get an unbelievable amount of information online. So I think we want to go on
Next
slide and end it up here.
And we'll quickly go through this because we discussed a lot of this in our past slide, but there really are so many benefits to a multi-generational workforce. It drives innovation, these difference in perspectives and backgrounds. and diversity really is what pushes things forward and creates innovation. Skill diversity, as we talked about, future-proofing your workplace. So with the pandemic and the shift towards digital, and then with a lot of the boomers retiring, I feel like Pennie in my situation, we really have been ready and embraced and mentored to take on this next transition. And it offers a competitive advantage. And there's also proven results that you have better performance and productivity, and it reduces employee turnover. So to the next slide.
And then just to end, if you look at this chart, you can see the generational shift. I mean, look at the millennials obviously taking over, into the year 2030. But I will say to the millennials, hey, watch out for those Generation Zs. They're coming, and you're going to have a whole new conversation. I know, because I raised one, as these Generation Zs start to take over. Thank you very much. I hope that we kind of showed you a point and counterpoint. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pennie and Erica. We appreciate it. It is interesting to kind of put those things side by side. I find that, my son is a millennial, and you don't need to text everything. Pick up the phone. So I guess that's part of my struggle in being. I'm not quite a boomer yet, but as I look at your schedule here, but close enough. Anyway, we're excited to have Ruthnie to join us and talk about the opportunity to work across a number of different age groups. City Hall is much younger now, which with our mayor and his team, but also you have generations of people that have been there and make the city work. So that's quite a big challenge too. And we're excited to hear from you.
Hi, thanks for having me. Jumping off of Erica and Pennie's slide, which I thought was a cute comparison of the A to Z's of boomers to Gen Z, I wanted to do the same thing, but kind of show what it's like when you're a millennial and you're working at a boomer organization. Sometimes millennials tend to gravitate and build community, like-minded, like-cultured community. And it can be challenging when you're in an environment that doesn't look like you. It's not the same age. It doesn't have the same generalizations as you. You have to take a pause and kind of find yourself. So I like to joke and tell people that City Hall is very much a boomer. And the fact that it's getting younger and more diverse, it gives us an opportunity to change the way that we deliver services to people, but it also gives us a better way of thinking about what residents are thinking and what travelers and businesses are thinking, because groups tend to do groupthink. You put us all in a room and you start thinking the same thing and liking the same thing and approving the same thing. And the city doesn't look like that, right? The recent census numbers came out and shows that, our population has grown for the first time in almost 70 years. And not only has it grown, before the pandemic, Syracuse was number 3 in the country for where millennials were moving to. So it looks different. People have different backgrounds now, and you're getting more of a blended community. So being able to bring different generations into City Hall requires that the old systems that we used to get information out, that those have to become a little more agile and they have to change. And changing one person's style of communication is very different than changing an entire organization's style of communication, as like everyone on this call is nodding. And this organization has been around since 1848. So sometimes it takes like knocking a brick out of the wall and then loving it back in to ensure that, that communication is sincere and genuine. Playing off of generalizations, for this generation, a lot of our achievements aren't based off of how many hours we have worked, but we're really looking at like, how many problems have I solved? How many things have I accomplished? And that's a shift from our counterparts who may be unioned and have been here for 20 or 30 years. And they know that 8:30 I punch in, 4:30 I punch out, got through the day, I'm good. So it required changing the way that we talked about success. And that's a little bit of a shift underneath people because they're like, what do you mean? You know, I was successful. I've been here 20 years. And it's just being empathetic and saying, we're not saying you're not successful. We're saying the definition is changing. And how do we adapt to change with it so that we're always ahead of the curve and not experiencing loss? Another thing that's different is our organization for a long time has recruited in a certain way. They believe that, you know, if there's a job that's available, you're either going to pick me or you're going to pick that guy. It's based on money. That's pretty much it. And now they're realizing that it's going to take a mix of benefits to attract a diverse workforce, a group of people that can become problem solvers, not just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Because think about it, Syracuse thrived during the first and second industrial revolution. That was the mechanical era, the assembly line era, the manufacturing era, where we thought very linearly about things. We had a lot of patents and all of them were around different mechanical tools. So we functioned really well as a mechanical city. We kind of missed out on the third industrial revolution when computers came about. That's also the time when urban renewal came about. That's also the time when, on the counterpoint of the civil rights movement, you had a lot of segregation, you had a lot of urban sprawl. So what we did was we broke up that assembly line and siloed it. And that shows up a lot of times in how we talk to each other, because if you grew up in a silo and you grew up in that silo and I grew up in this silo, it takes us time to like come back together and start to understand each other. So when we talk about recruitment, we have to now think about like, okay, we need to think of what are the priorities of not just the different generations, but the different ethnic and demographic backgrounds that we're attracting back into one workplace. That way we're thinking about what do we have to offer as an employer. We used to be like, well, this is what the salary pays and that's it. But now we're thinking about, oh my goodness, people are making decisions based off of the culture of this place, how embracing this place is. You know, whether we're going to look at you differently if you have different pronouns, you know, the fact that we switched to gender neutral bathrooms, how will that make people feel? And how do we accommodate a large group of people who aren't used to this level of change and aren't used to this level of flexibility and openness and creativity? So we're having to think about all those things without offending each other and stepping on each other's toes. It makes for a very fun mix of problem solving. And then again, the generation that I work with now, they are loyal to company, and the company is loyal to them. If something's not working out, then you tell the manager, like, we'll figure it out. Or you think about like, how can we, well, Jim's been here 25 years and Jim's been doing it this way for 25 years. And when Jim leaves, then we'll fix it. And it requires us to have to challenge our employees and make them uncomfortable and drive them to change. Whereas before, a company valued longevity. And now this company has to value problem solving and solution-based orientations. So it has been a big shift. And I remember I have a colleague who when we first came in 2018, she looked at me and said, I know that like your primary focus is public communication right now, but please don't forget we have a constituency of 2,500 employees in this building. And they will need as much hand-holding, and we're going to be shifting the earth under them. So please always include a very empathetic approach to internal communications as we do things. And we do, like we always think about before something goes out to the public, how will it make the people in here feel? And then you break that down more and say, how will it make the people who've worked here more than 20 years feel? And how will it make the people who've worked here less than 2 years feel? And it gives you an opportunity to just slow down, because my generation tends to be fast to solutions. And it requires us to talk to each other about strategies and the best ways to get things across. Next slide. So I wanted to pull back Erica and Pennie's chart here about the workforce in 2030. Take a look at this and kind of just take a deep breath and do that pause. In 2030, our baby boomers will still be in the workforce. I want you to think about that. We'll have our Gen Z that's coming in that moves faster than millennials. But our baby boomers will still be in the workforce. So we're taking a workforce that was here and we're spanning the need for communications to like the brim of different modes and different speeds. Next slide. I want to talk to you about, oh, go back. Actually, you could take off the slides for a second. I want to talk to you about how do you prepare for that generational shift, right? How do I prepare to go from 2 voices in the way that I write communications to possibly 4 or 5 voices in the way that I write communication without freaking out? So I want to play a little game. Hop into your chat and I want you to tell me how old you are without telling me how old you are. You're going to tell me how old you are based on the songs that were the soundtrack of your life. So think about the songs that were, you know, Billboard top 10 playlists when you were graduating high school or going to your first homecoming, or your wedding song, or your kid's first birthday parties. Like, go ahead and use the chat. I may have done the Macarena in my car this morning. And the fun part is music is a really neutral way to bring people together, like food, a lot of those cultural resources. And I like people to take a look at like how much those interests span across ages. And you can kind of guess. Last night on the dance floor, I don't even know the name of the song. Do you remember the song that Carlton Banks would dance to in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Da, 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 da. And I didn't even know that I liked the song because I'm so used to it on television, and it comes on and I just start like, da, 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 da. And you know, like the mayor's rolling and he's like, you shouldn't even know this song. This is before your time. But take a look at some of the funny songs that are popping up in the chat line. And think about like, do I know these songs? Does anyone know all of these songs? Or does anyone know all of these bands? I doubt you would, but a lot of these are popular. I gotta tell you, I love Duran Duran. It was my first vinyl. And people look at me and say, how does she know what that is? Because my dad gave it to me. So, you know, it's really good to take a look at some of these in the chat. Now, I want you to think, what's the first thing that you did when you started scanning the chat to get a sense of the diversity of this group? You took a pause. You kind of went back in your memory and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about that feeling. I'm thinking about that moment. Oh my God, there's someone here that loves Tribe Called Quest. I wonder who it is. And that's the first thing I will tell you to do when you're preparing to communicate to your expanding generation. Take a pause, take a breather, and kind of take everything in. The people who are at the table, the clothes they're wearing, the hairstyles, the different nuanced accents that you hear. It's just really important to appreciate and value people before we communicate to them, because it makes them feel seen, it makes them feel heard. And we can't do that if we're rushing to get things out. So before you communicate, we have to take things in. So that's like my first step to telling you, do not be freaked out about the speed of the workforce coming in, because as mentioned earlier, some of those nuances will surprise you. Some people are surprised that my interns want feedback all the time from me in person. The second thing I will tell you to do is, once you've taken that pause, I want you to like enjoy the diversity that you see. And then the second thing I want you to do is to think about, what are the challenges and opportunities of communicating to this group? Because sometimes we think, once I know a group's phenotypes, then I could just say, I know what she likes, I'm gonna write the tweet this way. I know what he likes. I'm gonna write the email newsletter that way. But also try to anticipate some of the benefits and the challenges of trying to communicate to this group. One challenge for us at the city was the city's never had a communications office before. When the mayor campaigned in 2018, something that we valued was when you get people across a wide spectrum of generations saying the same thing, you should really pay attention to it. And people kept saying, I don't know what's going on, or I didn't know that, or I didn't know I had access to this. And we thought, well, why don't people know public information? Aside from the fact that the city's website is older than all of these songs. We had to think about what are the modes of communication that these different people are using to access information? And do we have the support to get information out on all of those channels? And the answer was, no, we didn't, because traditionally we had a press secretary that came in with the mayor and left with the mayor. So there was a gap in continuous communication in the city. And we said, okay, well, we have to build a comms office, something that can be here. Like we plow snow, no matter who the mayor is. We take tax payments, no matter who the mayor is. We need to make sure that we can build an office that can communicate no matter who the mayor is. And when we started to build that office, we realized, how do we manage all of these channels? And the way that we said we would do it slowly and intentionally is, let's take a look at all the different opportunities there are with these groups, and then the challenges. And we said, let's try to meet as many of the challenges as we can. So it gave us some time to just think about those communications before we put them out. And then my favorite is like the AIM method, ask, inform, mirror. The AIM method for me is really about making sure that when you take that assessment into the room and you're looking at the breadth of diversity there, and you're just kind of taking it all in, the first thing you have to know is that you don't know everything. You just don't. The second, like, I don't know who the Banshees are, and I really want to know. And the second thing you have to recognize is when you don't know something, as a millennial, I want to Google it. Other people in my office may want to ask each other. Ask people, what works for you? What is this? How do you receive information? How do you process? What does your successful work environment look like? How often do you like to touch base? There's never anything wrong with asking. Like 50% of our job is inquiry, it's asking. So for me, once I take an assessment of what I'm working with, I ask first. It's even a part of my job interview process. I ask people, what tools do you use to manage yourself and to communicate? I've gotten everything from Trello and Slack to I'm just going to get up, walk across the office and talk to you. So I find it that it's best to be able to ask people, and they'll be straight up with you. Second, inform people on what expectation you can meet. Okay, I don't know what Trello is or Slack is, but I can meet you here and maybe you could teach me there. And then third, mirror that back. Do your best to mirror it back, because it's gonna force you to kind of like add to your own modes of communication. So one thing I hadn't done before was Slack, surprisingly, because I use text messaging a lot. And when my team said, oh, we use Slack in the office because it cuts down on email, I said, okay, well, let's try it. And now we've become really good Slackers and we've learned how to use it. And I have my 60-year-old supervisor who's jumping on Slack asking me quick questions because he knows that if he sits in my inbox, it'll take me longer to get to him. So that leads me to telling you, those digital tools, don't be afraid of them. They increase our modes of communication. Inquire about them. Ask your teammates, like, what is this? How do you use it? And how is it successful for you? And just take a look at it and make sure you understand which tools work for which channels. And then lastly, those tools exist because we're really moving from public information where you put out information like a billboard and then walk away to like the age of connectivity. That's what we call the fourth generation of innovation. It's about, Facebook's calling it the metaverse, but it's really about connectivity. It's about being able to like move from talking to people to engaging with people so that you stick around, hear what they have to say, process it. And there's this continuous loop where we're all entangled with each other. Good things can come from it, but burnout can also come from it. So it forces you to have to do that work within yourself. And then you start to realize that diversity isn't just about the ages in the workforce or the background in the workforce, but now you have more than one value system showing up to the workforce. And how do you meet that value system? Next slide. There's this really cool company that we're working with, because when I walked through the door, I was like, what do you mean we don't have an intranet? How do we talk to 2,500 people? 1,000 of which never walk into an office because they work in the field. And people looked at me and they blinked and they're like, I didn't realize that that was such a big deal. But as communicators, we're thinking about that. And when we sat down and talked to Unily about intranets and systems, I really love this graph that they showed, because they said for them, their software isn't about like making sure that we can tell the workforce what to do, but it's giving different online portals for the different parts of an employee to show up. The emotional part that needs to connect with an employee resource group or an affinity group. It also talks about, making sure that people who can physically be together have a space to communicate, and people who can't physically be together because we're working remote have a technological way to communicate and interface. It forced us to think about not just talking to our employees about it's open enrollment for benefit season, or this is our COVID protocol, but it forced us to start to think about, okay, these employees are humans with emotions. And no, we're not therapists, but we have to acknowledge and understand that there's an emotional need. After George Floyd, some of the mayor's employee messages had to take a step back from protocol and process and address the fact that there's a lot going on. These are the tools that you could use to talk to us and to reach out. My door is open, because we had to acknowledge that this isn't an assembly line anymore. This is more like a college campus. And the person who's in your workplace, they're not just there with their work hat on, they're there with their parent hat on, they're there with their skin color on, they're there with their gender on. And public events and local events can really affect their productivity. So as you do that AIM method, as you ask that person how they're doing and what's dominating their priorities in communication, and they're informing you on it, you do have to mirror back. You do have to say, like, I see that, I acknowledge that. And as an employee, you have to think about, how will this affect the way that I engage my team, even in our communications? So again, I always encourage people to take a pause, take it all in, and then kind of assess it, have fun in that process, use whatever tools you can, even if they are digital. And you'll find that a lot of digital tools force us back to human connections. They force us to be able to just appreciate the person again. I can't tell you post-COVID, well, we're still in COVID, but I can't tell you once we opened up after the vaccine, how many people I had to get used to seeing out of the little box. Boo Quilter is a local writer here, and she ran into me at an event. And she goes, "You're Ruthnie." And I was like, "Yes, don't know who you are." And she did this. I was like, "Oh, you're Boo Quilter," because I recognized her from Twitter. So it was like, oh my God, this is you in real life. And it became a very fun connection. So if anything, use the digital to get you back to those human engagements. And thank you.
Ruthnie, thank you very much. That was really great. And I'm so intrigued about how you had to do that. I think that you've got so many different facets, not just the demographics of age that we're talking, we're focusing on today, but the fact that people are in place or not in place. How did you decide the best way to bring people together? Did you kind of, pluck somebody from each area, from, somebody in the field versus somebody in management, and age differences? How did you come up with that solution?
A really fun benefit was when we came in as a team, I made everyone in the mayor's cabinet take a quick Myers-Briggs test, because I wanted to know what personalities there were just within our suite. And then I Googled Parks and Rec's characters according to Myers-Briggs. And I went around and I pinned a Parks and Rec's character picture on the inside of everyone's door. And I kind of told them, like, I'm really depending on you to be this character when we need to test communications. And, you know, everyone laughed about it and thought it was fun. And they'd go to each other's door to kind of see like who's who. But what would happen is my chief policy officer, Greg Lowe, and I, he's very human-centered and journalist and fast, and I'm very strategic and slow and intentional. So we make a really good team, and we plan out our communications and test them before they go out. So we figure if we test a communication on our team, knowing that at the time, no two members of our team were in the same Myers-Briggs box. So we had a healthy diversity of like background and characters and experience. But we would kind of just listen. We would test the communication on them. And if this person says, oh, I found that line offensive, or if this person says, oh, but the guys in the field, you know, like this is too long for them, it gave us the information that we needed to adjust with whatever tools we had. In 2018, the only tool we had was email and printers. Believe it or not. Those were the only communication tools we had, and social media. But employees at the time were not allowed to be on social media because the social media policy was from like 1996.
Wow.
Post, 2020 COVID comes. Now we have the ability to, we found ways to create closed portals on our website for our employees that only they can access. We purchased a text message solution program and found a way to get employees to sign up for communications. And we continue using email and social media. So now we were able to say, all right, if you're in the field and it's shorter, then we're going to tailor that bit of communication to 2 lines. And then we'll tell the public this, and then we'll do our general long form email for everyone who is at home with their laptops and their email on their phone. So for us, we tested, and then we adjusted using the channels and platforms that were available to us. And then where there were barriers, I pushed. I said, listen, we all acknowledge that there's a barrier to communicating with this group. And this is the tool that can help me address that barrier. If you prioritize this communication, then I really need better tools. And we started to slowly invest in better tools, not just as a team, but as city council as well, because they approve what we spend money on. And again, before 2018, the average age of city council was like 70 something. And then after 2018, we knocked off about 30 years off of the average age of city council. So because we were communicating with a different age group on city council, there was a different value system to, oh, I can see why she needs that tool, as opposed to me trying to convince someone, hey, I really need access to a text messaging tool or a Twitch tool. So.
Did you have to buy everybody equipment for that, or do you use their personal cell phones? Just curious as to how that worked.
Lots of legalities and policy with government communication. For those that had a company issued device, they were automatically enrolled in messaging. Okay. And for those that did not, we had to send out email campaigns, and we designed a poster campaign for different workplaces that we would post with a QR code, kind of just saying, and a QR code and a very, very simple branded short URL saying, during COVID, we're going to have to shift a lot very quickly without advance notice. If you want to stay up to date, if you need to stay up to date, use your personal phone and sign up for this communication. Because again, CAN Spam Act says I can't take someone's personal information and violate their trust just to communicate work to them. But if you opt in, yay for those comms laws, but if you opt in, then we can communicate to you. And again, this opened up a litany of things that we didn't foresee. The second I heard someone from my innovation team say, oh, we're gonna just ask people to sign up with their personal phones, it was like, okay, what did law say? 2, what did the workplace, workplace union policies and agreements say? And 3, we need to start to write policy management for how we would govern people's private information. So it created all of these other challenges But again, we test these things together and we identify what the challenges will be and say like, hey, the challenge, the benefits are worth the challenges.
Excellent, thank you.
And again, wonderful shout out to our IT team, which was like a skeleton crew in 2020. And they provisioned a lot of laptops, a lot of Surfaces, even though mine shut down earlier, and a lot of iPhones.
Which we all had to do, whether you were ready or not, going after March of 2020. Thank you. That's really, this is great. And it's really interesting to learn how you had to reach across different generations to figure out what works best for them. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about was the difference between the generations in what they value. So we touched upon it a little bit, that there was, for the older generation, it was you put in your time, you did your work, you progressed with the organization, you were recognized for it. And now I think that there is an urgency in people. If they feel that they're being successful, why not get recognized now? Why not take on the next challenge much sooner? Which makes sense. And I'm wondering if there is, if either Erica or Pennie or Ruthnie would like to address that of balancing those two thoughts about how you progress in the world of work today.
I'm going to kick it off to Pennie first.
Okay.
I would say, yes, things have changed. When I started out in the business, I think it was, stay with that company, climb your way to the top, raise your children as best you can. But I think there's been a real shift, and I personally think it's a shift for the better. If you want to know my opinion, I feel like what is valued now, and honestly, midway through my career too, I realized I took a step back, and same thing, like value now is, it's not the time you put in. I mean, I think that Ruthnie said this as well. It's solving the solution. Like, it might take someone 5 hours. Why would you value all that time if it can take someone 1 hour to solve the problem? So I think there really has been a shift to solving the problems, creating solutions, spending valuable time with your family, balance this out a little bit. I think my generation did, I don't want to say we messed it up, but I think our values were, work, work, work. And I think halfway through that, we're like, what are we working for? Like, come on, take a breath, I think, as Ruthnie said as well. So I think things have changed, and honestly, they've changed for the better.
And I'll kind of back that up. I totally agree with Pennie and Ruthnie. And I think and sometimes we battle this working in an accounting firm where time is so important. And I have these tough conversations all the time and say, but what you really want to look at is the value someone brings and how they solve these problems. And then going back to how we kind of talked about core values among generations and how they can be different. I think as far as leadership goes and the structure of an organization, as Ruthnie said, we're going to have all these generations in the workforce. So it's really important that you kind of accommodate for all of them. So for the millennials, we really want diversity, a good DEI, sustainability is important to us, training. So make sure you're providing that. And then also for the boomers, make sure you have a system in place where you are giving credit and kudos. We have a program called Kudos where we'll send congrats out through an intranet. So make sure you kind of accommodate for every generation.
And the other thing I'll say is that it's not just us. Pennie said was like, as a baby boomer, what were we working so hard for? Sometimes millennials will look at Gen Z, and sometimes we'll look at them and say, like, as a generation that's very close to us when it comes up to music, culture, and things that we've been exposed to, sometimes we'll look at Gen Z and say, like, why didn't you get more engaged? Why didn't you get more socially active? Why are we still working on the problems that you grew up with? And then we have to think about what those generations experienced. Because if you're a boomer, for example, and you're a person of color, then you likely underwent segregation. You likely had to deal with stigmatisms and some of the things that we're not proud about in our society. So as you raised your kids, you probably told them, listen, take advantage of everything that I didn't get, put your head down, go to work. All this other stuff will, this other stuff, focus on you, because you remembered that maybe you got arrested for protesting. Maybe you remember some of the painful things that you experienced. So you're going to raise your children to not experience that, to like put their head down, get through school, turn in those assignments. Friendships are great, but you got to focus on family, because you're trying to give them what you didn't have. No generation is perfect. Every generation will usually rebel against the 1-2 generations ahead of them. So in looking at that and thinking about that, we realized that what that did was, when you have Gen Z now that's picking up the mantle and bringing their whole self to work and challenging the workplace to meet their core values, there's this gap of like, why are we still dealing with this? Because there was a generation in between that was exhausted and just needed to put their head down and get to work and build their own generational wealth. And we didn't realize that, because as humans, we see things and we take it at face value, but having a conversation with each other gave us the opportunity to kind of like ask people, like, why are you not engaged in a certain way? And why are you not catching on to a certain value system? And that informed us as to like, oh, wow, we didn't even think about the things that influenced you and the things that influenced your priorities, and how do we become empathetic and then adjust for that? So, oftentimes this past year, when you looked at our workplace, there was a lot of feelings and emotions around relationships with the police and diversity issues, and even just the disruption of having to work from home for a generation that's used to that very stark work-life separation. And we had to become empathetic to it. A lot of us millennials were like, oh, we do this all the time, they'll be fine. But we had to think about the fact that, well, this generation had that stark separation for a reason. And quite frankly, after a year of my cat jumping on Zoom calls, I wanted the separation too. So again, I just keep encouraging people that as communicators, you get the joy of inquiry and curiosity and creativity. So use it, listen to each other, talk to each other, and as much as you can, try to understand and mirror back what you're seeing and hearing. Because if anything, it'll stretch you more in a good way, and make you a lot more attractive.
And Ruthnie, you brought up an important point too, with giving out a Myers-Briggs. Like, we did a lot of generalizations throughout this call, and I think throw in your personality traits along with it. I'm sure you see a lot of boomers that act like millennials, or they might even have some, Generation Z impulses in them as well. So we have to be careful. We did generalizations here, and for the most parts, most of it is true. But you have to remember that it's a person, as you said, that's had different experiences growing up, that's had different experiences through their lifetime, and is born with a type of personality that might lead them to act like maybe another generation. So I think we talked about that. You take in the whole person as well.
Yeah, I am, and my team tends to surprise me. I just have a very I remember when I came on, I kind of warned everyone. I was like, "Are you sure? Because I'm gonna make us uncomfortable," and it was fun, and they were open to that. And I even remember at one point, Mayor Walsh saying, like, let's turn some of this on its head. Some of this discomfort is good. So now we're at the place where I'll crack a joke and send a text message to like my colleagues. And I'm really surprised by the people that crack a joke back. Our chief financial officer was giving a briefing one day, and he had a slide where it was like winter is coming. And I was like, oh my God, he watches Game of Thrones. And I was trying to imagine my chief financial officer watching Game of Thrones. Or, or another fun one was our former tax commissioner is like everyone's favorite grandma and auntie. And, she'd hop in on leadership meetings. And one day she showed us her new tattoo on her knuckle. And I was like, you're so like, oh my God, you're so awesome. And she was just such fun. And while part of me felt bad that I didn't expect that from them, another part of me felt really warm that they felt comfortable to show those parts of themselves. So it's not just like, I'm a physical person and I've walked in here to work and clocked in, but how comfortable are you to bring some of those other vulnerable parts of your life in with you? Because you never know what connections you'll make.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Sometimes it's not just what someone looks like. You have to take in and actually listen to them too, and you can't judge. So we do marketing training for all of our younger professional. Most of them are Gen Zs who come in, and I have to kind of work with them on social media. And I feel like for them, they're like, oh, who even uses Twitter anymore? So it's just even a different generation. And I feel like I'm explaining things and they're like, so, but then I have found that I'm going over some tips and tactics with some of them, and I will be surprised because some people are like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not even on social media, or I'm not on LinkedIn. So you really can't make that assumption. You really need to listen and kind of have that mutual connection and then engage.
I have a question for the attendees. Think of it as a pop quiz. If you could use the chat, it would be helpful. Just on the scale of 1 to 5, how distracting is your workplace these days? And if your workplace is your kitchen, your kitchen table, that's fine. And if your workplace is an office with people coming in, the traditional workplace, that's fine. But I'm curious, how distracting is your workplace in 2021? Because these are the things that give me a sense of whatever I put out into the ether, what am I competing against when it comes to messages and distractions? So 5 being the most chaotic, the baby's in the background, the husband's mowing the lawn, and the dishwasher is going. And 1 being, Ruthnie, I need silence, I need the door shut, and I need to be hidden away somewhere. Oh, I've got a couple 2s. That sounds beautiful. Oh my goodness. For those of you that are achieving 1s and 2s, like, you should be sharing your secrets in the chat as to how you maintain focus with so many digital and personal distractions. Okay, there goes the 4s. All right, thank you, Melissa. And the hybrid workforce, clearly we are seeing that the pandemic has challenged our traditional values of what the workforce is supposed to look like and function like. We joked at City Hall, there are people that had been requesting to work from home for years, and we were like, we don't do that. And then we just did it for a whole year. And it was really difficult to convince some people as to why they should come back to the office, because they're like, I literally just did this job from half a table on my kitchen counter. So we definitely had to figure out a way how to bring people back. And I think trying to help them manage their workplace was the thing that helped us, because some people really liked the ability to access their human self while they were performing this work and solving problems. And others like me, who found it to be a 4 or a 5, I really wanted to go back to the workplace and achieve that human interaction, and I took it for granted. And I'm really happy that I have a little bit of balance now. I'm with you, Beth. You're a 5 like me.
So I apologize, everyone, for losing connectivity. The entire internet service to my building is down. So we have to figure out how to do it differently. And, made my phone a hotspot, got my iPad out. It took me a while, but we did it. So my apologies.
You're giving a round of applause emoji for shifting so quickly.
So I'm sorry to have missed some of the discussion. It sounds like it was really good. Yeah. One of the things that, I don't know if we touched on it, but I do want to talk a little bit about it is, you know, and all three of you talked about this a bit, but the difference in why people go to work. Is it mission based, or is it career based? Is it, you know, or is it, you know, strictly I'm out to earn $1? But I think that what I'm finding is that mission based means so much more to people today around what they want to accomplish and how they want to feel good about what they do. I'm wondering if you all could chat about that. Maybe Erica, do you want to start?
Yeah, and I'm with you in that nowadays I am really seeing that a lot of it is mission based, and the people in your office most likely and who stick around are people who really want to be there, who are getting something out of it, who enjoy the benefits of their workplace. I do think, and one of the questions we touched on is the different ways of working and the perks that different workplaces can have. I think some of the, I guess, younger generations come to work and they almost expect like and it not so much today with the pandemic, but they were almost expecting a fun environment at work as well. As far as you would see like ping pong tables or fun chairs are really great places to meet and have lunch. So I think that too played on the fact that these values were of importance to certain generations.
Yeah, yeah. Ruthnie, do you have something to add on that point?
Yeah, you know, being in government for us, the skill sets in the workplace are very vast. They're very wide. We still have a workforce that does rely on like physical labor, manual labor, all the way up to intellectual talent and skill. And what I found is our labor workforce, clearly they're essential. And they come to work because they want a better life for themselves. They want to be able to build wealth for themselves. And this is the way that they can do it. Now, our office group, city and government wages can't compete with private sector wages. And it's always been a challenge for us in the talent pool when we're trying to recruit and when we're trying to hire. So what we try to do is we try to come up with creative benefit packages so that we're appealing to the person that says, okay, you may not be able to give me everything I need in salary, but I do see the benefits, the health benefits, the education benefits, the home ownership benefits of being able to make an investment in this place. But we also recognize that when we're reaching to the other side of that talent pool that isn't physical labor, that's more intellectual labor, and we're asking them to choose us as an employer, that we are more increasingly having to be creative about work modes, having to think about contractors versus button seats employees. And we're also having to think about what are we offering these people, because they're going to be making an investment in us, right? Law of value says it's based off of what you get out after what you put in. So if this person knows that they can get $100,000 somewhere else in the private sector, and they're choosing us and they're only getting 80, we're very conscious of the fact that, all right, this person's making an investment in us. So why do they want to be here? Why do they want to make that investment? And can we serve that why so that we know we can have their intellectual ability for a long time? So it forces us to change our HR strategy and do a little deeper dive on some of our upper and middle management workforce, which is hard because, again, we're not used to doing that. We're used to putting up a job, rec, you applied because you want to be here, end of story. So
yeah, it's changing for everyone, and I can tell you that from firsthand experience with my firm. Pennie, what about Dermody, Burke, and Brown in this, mission versus job kind of thing in a pretty traditional industry.
It is, and I would say the majority of our employees have 5-year degrees. You know, they're working towards their CPA. I would tend to agree with Erica. I'd say it's mission, but I want to say maybe it's 50-50. I think based on our industry, it's probably 50% mission, 50% career. Most of the young people coming out of college that are, you know, going into this particular profession are pretty career driven, whether they're, you know, no matter what age they are,
Right.
but also looking, Eric is absolutely right. They're absolutely looking for a place where they can thrive, not only professionally, but feel a part of something. I mean, we have an emerging leaders group in our firm, and people want to be a part of something. They want to give back to the community. They want to have a purpose beyond just putting in their, you know, their hours, so to speak. So I think it's 50-50 in our profession right now.
Great. Beth, did we open it up to questions from the participants?
We told people they were welcome to post questions in the chat, but I think we can definitely open it up and allow attendees to take themselves off mute and ask questions to the group.
It'd be great. And I can't see everyone because I'm on an iPad and not a big screen. So I think it's a small enough group that we can
Yeah.
just go with that. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments or things that they'd like to share their thoughts?
So I'll jump in as a Gen Xer, right in the middle of Gen X. I guess, you know, and we're of course known as the generation that gets ignored and cast aside, and so we just don't care, and or else we'll like burn it down and, you know, like anarchy and all that. But I guess, you know, in your experience, like what would be, you know, I can see the Gen X, like I see both sides of it, and I have in myself, you know, kind of some traits that you might characterize as from the baby boomer generation, and also some traits that you could characterize from, you know, millennials, and maybe even, you know, my kids are Gen Z. So, you know, there's all of that, but I'm wondering like how someone who's kind of stuck between the generations, you know, on both ends, like how we can kind of facilitate, you know, better communication and, you know, working and connecting those generations.
Great.
I want to jump in. Kelly, you guys have been my best allies. I find the middle generations being great at bringing people together. And I think when you're in the middle, like have fun, be the middle child, and learn from the older generation's mistakes. And when, you know, and learn some new tricks from the younger generation. But I do have to say that I have found that that generation has been some of my most challenging employers and bosses, because the expectations are very high for individualized high performance. But I also found that you guys have been the most empathetic when it comes to like bringing groups of people together. So on behalf of your generation, thank you.
It's so funny. I'm just gonna piggyback off of what Kelly said, because I was thinking the same thing. I actually am in this weird mini generation that is referred to as like the Jordan Catalano or Oregon Trail generation. Because I find myself having an identity crisis. Like I am not, and Rob and Andrew tease me all the time about this. I am not a token millennial, but I'm not really a Gen Xer either. I grew up with a computer lab and didn't have Facebook until like grad school. So, or a cell phone until like later on in life. So I have found myself professionally being a go-between. And I was going to ask if you guys have had that experience with people who are like on the cusp of the different generations. So Kelly and I are on the same page, but I thought that was very interesting.
Thank you, Katie. I think we see that across, and I think that, you know, programs like this, just raising everyone's awareness. How do you talk to one another? How do you communicate? And it goes beyond just the, you know, labeling by generation, of course. It's what's your personality trait? What, have you done DISC training to assess what works for different folks? And it really is about raising awareness of one size does not fit all. We need to recognize everybody's differences and embrace them, and really look out and say, this is kind of cool. I'm going to obviously date myself using that word, but it's really neat to be able to stretch across generations and work together and come up with solutions. But having the willingness to do it is so key. And I think it's the only thing that's going to make it work, is everybody being open to it. And we've got something in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Ruthnie, did you want to expound?
Yeah, I was just saying, as much as I love being a millennial, my biggest challenges with being a millennial is I'm Haitian American. So I'm what me and my cousins are what we call 1.5ers. So we were born at home in Haiti, but we were raised in the States. So everything inside of our house was still very 1980 Caribbean island, and everything outside of our house was not. And we often had to like go back and kind of bring our parents along or bring our families along. And sometimes we're like, we're not going to bring them along. We're going to leave them where they are because they're comfortable. And we're not going to bother them. And we're just going to go find our own community. But it does lend to being a more conservative millennial who has traditional values. And people, some of my friends will look at me and say like, oh my God, I can't believe you still do that. And in high school, I would pick up the phone and say like, good evening, how are you? And they're like, girl, like, relax. But these are things that culturally, when you're Caribbean, you really prioritize like human connection and self-reliance, and you don't want to drive dependency on technology, because like my mom and dad are always saying, what are you going to do when there's a blackout? Like, how are you going to survive? Do you know how to keep batteries in a flashlight? Do you know how to keep a home phone in case you don't have something that's on a charger? So there's always that intention to want to build in us some sort of resilience that can outlast technology, because like we made the machines did not make us. Okay.
Well, it's so funny. I still write personal notes to people.
And my cat got me a dead mouse, so excuse me.
Oh gosh. See how this is how we've had to adapt to our surroundings today, because we're working in so many different ways, but losing connectivity to a mouse. Any other thoughts or questions or comments that people have?
I want to say, I totally relate, Kelly, and I want to say I'm firmly an Xer. And I am the quintessential, my mother and many of my board members are baby boomers. Much of my workforce is millennials. I raised millennials and Gen Z. So I know how to relate to them all just because I'm in that sandwich generation, which is fine. But I think we sort of touched on this a little bit. Like, I'm the latchkey generation. Like, it's just suck it up and get her done. Like, it's just this very sort of, it gives me this sort of, almost like I have to work on emotional intelligence and empathy and understanding my expectations. I think the expectations for my generations were enormous. And so I think that we place a lot of stress on achievement and what we can do, and self-reliance and personal responsibility. And, like I said, just suck her up and get her done. I mean, that's kind of it. And so I find being empathetic and understanding about different priorities, different frames of reference, different working styles, different goals, to be a challenge, because people see the world differently, right? And I can see that in my kids from 30 to 20. Like, the way they see the world is different, and the expectations about work-life balance and outcomes and all. So I find that to be a challenge. And so my constant struggle is patience, empathy. I'm trying to understand what drives other people and how to reach them. So I'm just throwing that out there, that I find that to be a constant struggle.
But your awareness of it makes it huge. I mean, that makes your ability to respond to it that much more immediate. And I think that's the sign of a good leader, that you understand what your shortcomings are. You understand that empathy is a big, powerful tool in how we get things done today. And it makes so much sense that we have that attribute. So congratulations. Anyone else? By a show of hands, do we feel like this was a helpful seminar to attend? Was it a topic that people appreciated and it resonated with? Great, great. I think then, Beth, we'll sign off for now and hope that everybody comes back to the next one.
Yes, Susan, thank you so much. You did a tremendous job, as I knew you would. And I can't thank you enough for agreeing to moderate this discussion. Pennie, Erica, Ruthnie exceeded all of my expectations. So I cannot thank you each enough. I look up to all of you, and I am just so thankful you were able to share your wisdom and knowledge with our attendees today. So thank you very much. And yes, this is the second in the series of 6. So we have 4 more sessions in the Eyes on the Future series. So please go to the events page on our Center State CEO website and register for our seminars that are coming up. So thank you very much for attending. And again, special thanks to CPS Recruitment. They are our presenting sponsor, and we are only able to do this through their support. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.